Yep. Good morning, everyone. So, in previous session, we learned about working with how we can deal with React 18 environment. So, what we learned yesterday, I will give a basic overview. We discussed about how to create React application. So, using React actually 18. So, React 18 application with Webpack bundler. We used Webpack bundler. So generally, what is a bundler? What is the purpose of bundler? Bundler is a software tool used in web development. So for configuring an application, the complete application configuration happens using bundlers. So which file to start with? What files to be used as CSS scripts? Which command to run? Which port number servers to use? All this configuration is defined by bundlers. What are other bundlers we have used for React? So we have a bundler like Parcel and White. So we discussed how to create a React application with Webpack bundler, and we discussed about the file system, React application. That means initially when you create an app, what is the basic infrastructure you get? That infrastructure we added manually earlier. So with bundler, that infrastructure is automatically created. So we already know it comprises of node modules. So it contains public, SRC. These are the folders that you will find in an React application. We have package JSON. So package JSON and package lock JSON, two files you will have. You have git ignore. Another one you will find. Yeah. So readme.md. And how the application flow works. That means the basic React flow we discuss. That means which one will be in the startup. So actually what we do is we design component. Component is injected into index. Index is used by index.html. So we will learn how to work with the components and hierarchy. Yesterday what you saw additionally is how React 18 uses virtual DOM. React 17 uses a different method for virtual DOM, and React 18 is different. React 18 uses React DOM dot create root. It will create a root, and through that root it is going to render. That's the basic point we saw. And how React 17 works. It uses React DOM dot directly render. So we saw the complete change, how it works. We discussed about the complete change in the infrastructure, right? So, and we learned how to start application. To start the application, you need to use npm start. Automatically it starts with your index. So you saw the difference between how React 17 environment renders and React 18 environment renders. Now we need to learn everything first using React Advanced. That means all React 18 related features, how they work. So first today what we are going to see is about components in React 18. So I already explained a basic about components in 17. So React 18 components. So we will start working with the components. Actually, React is considered as component based. So we generally call components are building blocks for single page application. They are the building blocks for single page application. SPA is single page application. So entire application is built with components. Application is designed with components. So a component is built, an application is built with components. So that's the reason components are considered as the building blocks for application. Generally, a component comprises of presentation, um, markup. It contains markup, styles, and logic. This is same everywhere. A component contains markup, styles, and logic. So usually an application is built with components. I showed you a real example here. Suppose if you see like Amazon. So Amazon is a React application. Amazon, Netflix, Instagram, Facebook, all these are built with React. And in this application, actually, you see a sliding banner. I know you already know about them, right? So this sliding banner is a component. What is its name? Carousel component. So you have this one. What is it? Off canvas. It is an off canvas component. So in Bootstrap, you have an off canvas component. It's a new component into Bootstrap. So this is called off canvas. So it is just like a pop-up. It's just like a model. It is an off canvas. And you see these containers, boxes. These are called as what? Cards. So that means every application is built with a set of components. To design manually like this for every application, it takes time. So we can create reusable components so that we can implement in various applications. So what a component contains, it contains the presentation, it contains styles, and it contains the functionality. So how you create this presentation? Actually, every component design comprises of markup, So using HTML, it comprises of styles with CSS and the logic. Logic, you can say functionality. Functionality with JavaScript. JavaScript. Functionality with JavaScript. It uses, I told you, JSX. So we discussed that it is not directly using JavaScript. So it is using a JavaScript extension libraries, JSX. So it comprises of the markup using HTML styles with CSS and the functionality with JavaScript. So how we can design a component? How we can create a component? What is the purpose of this component? What is the advantage? So a component is easy to reuse and extend. A component is easy to reuse and extend. So it enables simplified testing approach. That means the advantage of working with component based is easy reusability, extensibility, testability. So that means reusability, extensibility, testability, maintainability. All these things you can achieve by using this component based environment. If anyone asks you in interviews like what is the advantage of using a component based environment, what is the advantage of component based environment? Component based environment always enables these features, the four important features. So easy to reuse, easy to extend, easy to test, and easy to maintain. All these things can be enabled through this component based approach. Component based approach. So how the components are created? Remember, functionality with JavaScript or TypeScript also. It uses TSX. Already we know that. So first we are going to deal with JavaScript, then we will see TypeScript. TypeScript we will learn. After learning TypeScript, we will implement it. JavaScript you already learned. We will just use that here. Right? So this is the basic about components. So everywhere these components are used in the modern web development. So if anyone asks like, is this a new concept for web designing? No, we already have this in JavaScript. But in JavaScript, it's a very complex, lengthy approach of creating components. Means we can create components, we can work with the components like environment in JavaScript. JavaScript have the component approach. Already we built lot of single page applications using the component hierarchies. JavaScript have that technique. But in a JavaScript way, if you have to manage, it will take time. So that's the reason modern technologies made it simple. So we are not using any new concept. So we already have this concept in JavaScript, but we are using in a simplified way, in a more easier way. because in JavaScript to create components it will take lengthy process. Design component, add styles to it, and add that component to the page. It will take time. This is easy approach. So React, Angular, Vue, all these technologies are popular because of making the development process faster and easy with this components approach. You will see once you start using detailedly, you will understand how easy it is to create them. So let's see now how to create components for our React 18. So actually creating a component. So how to create a component and how to add into our application, we will see that. So we created yesterday application. In that application, now we will see how to create these components. Actually, as per the project traditions, every component is designed with 3 files in real world environment. In real world environment, every component is designed with 3 files. Means at large scale projects, you will find a component is having 3 files. What are those 3 files actually? That means, so a component is designed, a component is designed with following files. So at higher level, it is designed with files. First one, you will have the component JSX file. JSX file, or it can be JS file. You can give the extension .js or JSX, both are same. Even you give the extension .js, the syntax inside will be JSX. So traditionally, many people have an habit of just giving JS. But in many projects, because we treat it as a JavaScript extension directly, we use this JSX extension. Doesn't matter. You can use JSX or you can use JS. So, and what this file contains? Actually, this file contains the markup and logic. Markup and functionality. Functionality is defined here. That means what is the presentation, HTML, and the functionality is defined in this file. So we have markup and functionality in this JSX. And you will have a component.css. In this, we define all the styles. Whatever styles are required, we configure those styles here. So styles are maintained in a separate CSS file. And actually, every component have dot spec.js. It can have a spec.js or it can have a test.js. This is actually test file. This is testing. You can simply say test file. That means it comprises of testing logic. That testing logic is defined in this file. You have spec.js or test.js. Depending on different testing tools. So every component is tested. You will learn how to test at the end, once you learn complete designing, you will learn how to test. That means testing is checking whether the functionality written by developer is matching the client requirement. Is it evaluating the same values what he is expecting? It is having the same content what he is expecting. Testing includes even identifying whether a link is present or not, whether a title is present or not, whether a link is functioning with the same functionality as he expecting or not. Everything is tested. Actually, in a React application, whenever you create a React application, by default a testing framework called Just is installed. Just framework is installed. Just is a testing framework. JavaScript based technologies use various testing frameworks like Jasmine, Karma, Just, Protractor, all these. So when you create a React application using Webpack, by default, your project comes with a testing framework. Automatically, a testing framework is added into this, which you don't need to use now. Later, you can learn about that. So this Just framework is used for testing. So testing have separate functions. Testing have a approach. Actually, JavaScript based applications have unit testing. That means instead of testing entire application at a time, every module can be separately tested. You written a function, you can test the function. Unit testing allows you to test each and every functionality individually. So this is a testing framework which already have. So traditionally, in real world projects, when you look at a component, it is built with three files. So a JSX file or JS file where the markup and logic is there, the CSS where the styles are defined, another one spec or test. Actually, you see in our project, when we created our project here, this project is already having those files. This is app component related files. We discussed that by default an app component is added into project. By default an app component is added into project. And that app component is this. And it is having three files, the JS file and the CSS and the test. That's a traditional approach. So, and it is almost mandatory for every component. So, when you are dealing with components, so you should know that clean separation is very good, right? Instead of messing up all the contents in one place, so cleanly separate. So the logic and markup, the styles, and the test. Now we will see how to add a component like that. But as of now, we will ignore this file, test files. We will maintain two files for every component. One is the JSX or JS, another one is the CSS. Test files later you can see. Actually, you see package JSON. When we go to package JSON, you can see here in the package JSON, the libraries here, testing library called Just DOM is added. There is a testing library called Just DOM. Just is a testing framework. And by default, it is added in your application. Okay. So let's see now how to create a component. So we will see how we can design a component. So first step, To create a component, already we basic rules I told you. A component can be designed using JavaScript function or JavaScript class. A component can be designed using JavaScript function and JavaScript classes. So what is difference between functions and classes? I will tell you. We are going to see those differences. We will learn both of them. But I told you in modern Java, in modern React, we give priority for functions. You have seen when we created an application, by default app component came with function. By default app component is designed with a function. So when to use a function, when to use a class, we will get a clarity. We will learn about that. So in order to perfectly work with components in React, you must have a complete idea on functions and classes. So in JavaScript, I hope you already learned detailedly about functions and classes. I will give you a list of topics which you need to be perfect in order to work with React functions, right? Actually, means you already, people coming from JavaScript background, they already know. If anybody is not aware of these concepts, you please go through those topics, because if you have learned JavaScript from different sources, then make sure that you have knowledge of all this, because React uses all this. What is about functions? Means what are the topics of functions you need to be perfect in JavaScript? Function related topics 1. So you need to know about function declarations and function expression. You need to know about function definitions. So function parameters. We have REST parameters and we have spread syntax. You need to know about the function return. So closure, callbacks, promises, callbacks, promises. So you need to know about asynchronous. Asynchronous promises are internally handled. Here, some async I will tell you. So you need to know about anonymous functions. Anonymous function, and you know about IIFE pattern. What is IIFE pattern? Immediately invoked function expressions. IIFE pattern for this. So you need to know about recursion, function recursions. So function expression, declaration, definition, parameters, REST parameter, spread parameter, function with returns, function closures, function callbacks, function promises, asynchronous functions, anonymous functions, IAFE pattern for functions, and recursions. These are, and there is a shorthand technique, that is arrow functions. So the shorthand technique of writing the functions. These are the topics you need to be perfect in JavaScript in order to work in React. So in JavaScript, when you learnt about functions, I hope you learnt all these things, right? These are very basic. So because we are going to use these in various occasions now, means a developer is using a component with function, designing a component with function means he is master about functions. In almost all React interviews, questions will be among these topics. That means out of 100 React interviews you attend, 99 interviews will have questions on this. So many people fail React interviews because they don't have a proper knowledge of JavaScript. Because see, React is a library. Frankly speaking, there are no questions in a library. In a library, ready-made functions, what can I ask him? Everything he can answer. That means in a library, in a framework, there are only few things to ask, and everybody can know easily, remember easily about it. There is no much possibility of asking you questions relative to a library or a framework. They are very easy. Everybody can remember. Very simple. Language is the part where people face issues, and developers' ability completely is monitored through language skills. A developer is a developer only when he is good in language, not great in libraries or frameworks. So that is the reason all React interviews will concentrate majority on JavaScript. So these are the most commonly asked topics in React interviews, and these already you learned in your JavaScript. These basically you have to learn in JavaScript. Any JavaScript learner knows all these things. So it comprises of both the new ECMS 6 features. So you have ES6 features and the traditional JavaScript, everything is there. So if you are working with components, you are dealing with function components, then this is one important thing you should know. That means you must have a complete idea on these topics. I just given these topics list because if anyone is not aware of anything, please explore them and try to know about them, because these are very much important. Our traditional JavaScript learners know all these things, right? We learned all these in our JavaScript classes. So we will first start with working with a function components, how we can deal with function components. So let's see. So creating a component. So here a function component can be configured using declaration or expression. A function component can be configured using declaration or expression. People use both techniques actually. People use both techniques depending on the requirements. And you know already what is a declaration and expression. So declaration means declaration is so function and the name and the parameters, and this is how we define a function. This is, you know, this is declaration. That is declaration. People have an habit of designing a function using expression. So that means you can configure a constant, and you can define some name is equal to function. This is expression. This is an expression. This is an expression. So in JavaScript, you learn the difference between them. Actually, what is difference between declaration and expression? Expression allows you to initialize different functionalities. That means in one situation, this name is using a function. In another situation, it can use another function. If it is an expression, because the name is not a function here, it is a variable. So we have an habit of writing in both ways. So you don't need to get surprised if you see an expression in React, because some people in some projects, they create a function component using expression syntax. Then you will be surprised like why they are writing expression syntax here. They are writing expression syntax because they want that functionality to change in different occasions. If they want a functionality to change in different occasions, then expression is the best way. If you want a specific functionality, then declaration is the best way. So you are designing a component whose functionality will be changing, then you better go with expression. A static functionality, a specific functionality, then you better go with declaration. So we have to use these two techniques. We can use any of these two techniques. So let's see now. We will go to our project. In this project, now what we will do is, we will maintain a separate folder in SRC by name components, because I don't want to mix up with others. And a good habit for developer is, for every component maintain a folder, because every component have 3 files to deal, and if everything you messed up in a one place, it's difficult to handle them. So we will add a new folder. I'm adding a new folder here. Okay, I will give the name as login. So I'm creating a login component. So for every component you add a folder. Currently we have only one component, that is login. Means in these components you can add like I selected another new folder in components. This is like register. That means we are having two folders, one login, another register. So let's go to login and let's add the files for a component. Traditionally, what are the files you need for a component? So I am adding a new file. First file is login.jsx. Currently you are using JavaScript as language. Remember, you cannot use simply TS TypeScript. To create a TypeScript application, you need a separate TypeScript environment, because TypeScript compiler is different. You have to set up environment for TypeScript separately. That you will see later. Currently, our environment is set with JavaScript. By default, every React application is configured with JavaScript. So JSX, fine. What is another file required? Another file required is login.css. So we have login JSX and login CS. This is login CSS and login JSX. These two are defined. Okay. Traditionally, you need one more file, but as of now, we are not using that. That is test file. test file we will add only when we need we do some testing, right? As of now we will ignore this. Okay, let's go to the JSX file. What you can have in this JSX file, the functionality and markup. So JSX contains the functionality. So how to write a function? So we need to write a function by using function keyword and the function name login. As per the rules of React, every component name must start with a uppercase letter. Mandatory. So otherwise it cannot recognize it. You are violating the rules. It will show issues. It is mandatory that the component name must start with a capital letter. After that you can maintain any case, but the first letter must be caps. It's mandatory. Okay. So this is function, and this is function declaration approach. There is another technique, as I told you. Developers have an habit of writing like an expression approach. So LET, so we have login is equal to function. That is the approach. Or they have shorthand techniques also. People these days use shorthand technique. That means LET, login, and it is a function which returns some functionality. That means it returns some functionality. Like this we define. You know, this is a arrow method, arrow technique. So you will see different ways in projects. That means there is no surprise because you know about functions, you know how functions are written. And if you see somebody writing like this, there is no surprise because it is a expression related, but this is expression. A declaration cannot be written like this. A declaration compulsory requires function keyword, right? Expression you can write in this way, you can configure in this way. So the basic regular tradition is declaration. We have a function login, and this is the login. Okay, now the next point here, this login is not available to access outside because currently we are using module system. You know, JavaScript module system. In JavaScript you learnt about modules, how to export and how to import functions, classes in a module system. So what are various types of module systems? CommonJS, RequireJS, UMD, AMD, ES modules. These are different types of module systems. So login is a function which is written in a separate JavaScript file. You cannot access in any another file. So from outside location. In that case, you have to make sure that you marked with export. It is mandatory that it is marked with export. Otherwise, you know that you cannot use a module because you created a JSX file. That means you created a module. That means now login is a module. In this login module, there is a login function. And how you can access this function? So you can access the function outside by marking it as export. I hope you know another point. You can mark it as export default also. Am I right? You already learned this. So export default. But you know that in every module there can be only one default. One default export can be there. So if there are multiple exports, then there can be only one default. There can be one default. So what is the purpose of this default export? The default export uses a eager loading mechanism, and without default it uses a lazy loading mechanism. So we prefer some lazy loading mechanism regular. Lazy loading, it loads only when it is in use. Eager loading, it loads even when if it is not in use. So we use that mechanism. So here, so traditionally you will see both. In some occasions we want eagerly loaded, then we use default export. In JavaScript modules you will learn when to use export, when to use default, and there is a different method of importing default also, right? So currently we will make it just export function. So another important rule here. So in a module system, every member is private in access. You have to mark as export. You have to mark as export to make public in access. So we need to write like this: export, so function and the function name. Function name. That's how generally we define. Every member is private in access. You have to mark as export to make public in access. That is the important thing. And a component name must start with uppercase letter. So component name must start with uppercase letter. That is the first option. And very, very important, a component must return function. A component must return function. A component function must return a function. Must return a function. You know, a function can return any type of data. In JavaScript, function can return numbers, booleans, string, array, object, or a function. A function can return a function, right? So it's important that every component function must return a function. And how do you write a function to return function? So that means actually to return a function, so syntactically export function, the function name, and it uses return. You can write a function. So, but you know, anonymous functions have a shorthand technique. Anonymous functions are written in an empty parenthesis now, right? Anonymous functions are defined in an empty parenthesis. In JavaScript, anonymous functions are written in an empty parenthesis. So this is the way how you have to configure. Actually, what does this means? It is an anonymous function which is returned by this function. That means this is anonymous syntax actually. You know, in JavaScript, this is anonymous function. So a React function component must return a function. It must return a function. And an anonymous function is defined in this way. That's general JavaScript traditionally, you know. Just for example, roughly here, means just for example, HTML. I'm just showing you a HTML page, just roughly. Suppose in JavaScript, you are writing a function. So in function, the function name is some login is a function. This login function have to return a function. It can return a function. It can return a function. This function have some document dot write login something. Now how you access this function? So because it is a function, it is returning a function, and so we generally use login. Login is a function. That function returns a function. That means what this is invoking an anonymous function. Invoking an anonymous function. That anonymous function is returned by this particular login. And this immediately invoking an anonymous function. This is what we call in JavaScript IIFE. Immediately invoking the function expressions, right? This is basic point in general JavaScript. So that is the approach here. So it should return a function. It should return a function. And what a function should return? That means every component must return a functionality. And in that functionality, what it should return? Actually, here important, every component function must return a function with the fragment. Must return with the fragment. Must return with fragment. So a component function can return one fragment. It can return only one fragment. It can return only one fragment. Fragment means a block of code. A fragment refers to a block of markup code. Only it can return only one markup, means one fragment. Actually, this fragment is going to render in virtual DOM. So fragment is rendered in virtual DOM. This fragment is rendered in the virtual DOM. So in the virtual DOM, fragment is rendered. So fragments are rendered in virtual DOM. So that is the key point here. So virtual DOM root is div now. In index there is a div. Virtual DOM is in div. Now here some points are there. How a fragment is returned? Actually, we will write a div here. So this is one fragment. This fragment is going to be returned. It is going to be returned in another div in index page. That means we have an ID called root, am I right? In HTML page. So this div is going to be rendered in this div. Why? Already there is a div. Already there is a div. Again, why you are creating a div? So that means a fragment. Why you created a div? Because in HTML you know that this is the container which can hold everything, right? So that is the reason people have an habit of doing like this. But this is not a great idea every time, because already there is a div. Then why you are rendering a div inside another div again? So then a fragment can be defined in several ways. Remember, a fragment can be configured using various techniques. Number one, you can use any HTML container. You can use any HTML container, like you can use a div, you can use a span, you can use a heading, anything, doesn't matter. You can use a form, you can use a main, right? Anything you can use, it doesn't matter. That means In HTML, you know that a container holds some content, you can use it. So a container holds some content, you can use it. So you can put anything, but you know, you cannot use a container which is RC data type. You know, elements in HTML are how many types? 5. Normal elements, void elements, RC data elements, raw text elements, and foreign elements. If it is an RC data type, you can't. That means, can I try rendering anything? Can I try rendering anything in text area? No, not possible, because text area is RC data type. It will not allow any another markup inside. It is only for plain text. It is a container, but it is an RC type container. So in HTML, you should know whether it is an RC type or not. Then you can implement that. Okay. Next point is you can use empty fragment. You can use empty fragment. You can use an empty fragment to render. Empty fragment is nothing but just you can put an empty fragment like this. This is not going to render any element. So it will render only the contents inside its scope. What div or span or anything will do? They render the div also. What this empty container will do? It will not render any element, but it can hold the content. That means this is not going to render any element, but it can render everything what is inside it. That means now what you can do is, suppose you defined a div. So, and here I created a heading like a form. In the form, you have a heading like some login, some say user login. We have a data list and we have data term. So we have like username, data definition. We discussed the basic rules of JSX. Every element must have a end token, or you have to write self-ending. So another data term, password, and data definition here is input type is password. And here another, we put a button. So this is a login. Now the key point, this container so can be an empty fragment. You can keep an empty fragment like this. That's also okay. You can keep an empty fragment inside. Actually, when you are rendering a form, you can directly use it. But later, if I want anything outside the form, then it's not possible. Then you have to make sure that it is inside one container. So why you are using this empty container? Because I don't want to disturb the DOM by adding an unnecessary element which we don't use. Already there is a div. In that div, this is going to render. Then why you are rendering another div or any another element inside? You can try this. You can use this. There is another technique. Another important point is you can also use React.fragment. React.fragment component. You can use this React.fragment component. What is the advantage of this React fragment is it is used to inject various types of dynamic services into your component at the time of rendering the component. So it is used to inject different types of dynamic services. So general empty component or empty container, they cannot render any dynamic contents. React fragment is a React dynamic fragment which allows you to inject any services. Like, suppose I am using login. What is a service used for logins? What are the services used for login? Tell me, any idea? For login, what are the services mostly used in any web application? Logins use one of the major basic service that login uses is cookies. That is the major thing first, because login needs to maintain the information of the user who is logging. Then it needs a cookie service. In JavaScript and all, cookie is used as an object, but in React they are used as services. We have to inject the services and use those services. And we need services like CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA is a service. What is CAPTCHA service? It is used to prevent robots from logging in. It is used to verify whether the user is a human or a robot. And that is not through a code, that is done through a service. CAPTCHAs, they are services. That means a component doesn't require services every time. But when a component requires various types of services to be injected into the component dynamically, in that case, this will play the key role. React fragment. That's the reason you can observe here when a login is there, index.js. So app.js. In this I deleted. They render the markup using a React fragment. If they want, they can use that services also. Actually, I deleted and we customize it. So here, instead of this, we can use React. React is imported from React core library. And React have a component. So React have a component. And React have a fragment. So many classes are there. This React fragment you have to use, and we need to end through React fragment. This React fragment is good for various component related components to inject. Later you will see how these component services are used, different types of services are used. So when a component is using various types of services, then better use a React fragment. It can dynamically locate the services, inject the services into your components. So when you are working with React fragment, so this is very important. So you can use React fragment component, so which is good for providing various types of services to a component. So you write like this: React dot fragment. So you can write everything in React fragment. It depends on your requirement. So you can use an ordinary empty container. You can use an empty container. So general HTML container, empty container, or React fragment. So these are the ways how you return a fragment, various ways of returning a fragment. Okay, now we designed a component and we configured what it should return. These are basic things. Remember, learning about component has so many concepts. One by one we will explore. One by one we will learn here. You just learned how to design a basic component. Now how to start with this component? As of now, this component is not having any styles. There are no effects, nothing. Just we plainly using a basic component. So how to render this component. We want application to start with this component. So where we have to do, go to index.js. In index.js, and here we have to import the component. And remember, that depends on how you are exporting the component. That means I told you, if you are exporting this component, so export default. If it is export default, then how you will import? You have to just import. Which one? So directly log in from the components. This is how we do. Default exports will not have a curly brace. It will not have a block. Default exports will have only this. Right? You know, in JavaScript, you learned how to import a default text. Right? If it is not default, that means this is not marked as default. Then you have to use the brass, right? Like this block you have to define, mandatory that is. So now you are importing from which folder? Components. In components, there is a folder called login. In the login, there is a module called login. This login is treated as a module, as I told you. Every JavaScript file is a module. JSX file is a module. In that, we have a function called login. It's a function. And it is treated as a JSX element because it is using all the JSX rules now. It is not JavaScript, it is using JSX rules. And now we will render into the root.render. Which one? Login. Remember, because you are currently practicing the technology, so until you learn the final concepts, every day what we do, we design a component, make it in the startup. But after few days, you will set up environment in such a way that every time it will start up with only one, and which component you want, you can choose. It will render the output and show it. But to create that, you need to learn a concept called routing. By using that routing concept, you create all the environment. But until that moment, every day, what we are practicing, we will keep in the startup and we check it, right? So now login is there. Now you can see the login component is rendering. This is the user login, some component is rendering. Now I want to configure some styles for this. I want to configure some styles for this. Right, we want to add some styles. So what I will do is this login component. So this form we will keep in some main area. You know, main is a semantic. In the main, we are keeping the form. Okay. Now we want some styles. Let's go to its CSS file now. In the CSS file, I'm writing main. So display as flex, justify content center, align items center, height will give 100 VH. So this will fit into the center. And wherever form is there, the form comprises of padding as 10 pixel or 20 pixel, and form have a border, so solid gray, and it have a border radius as 20 pixel. Okay. And now it have a box shadow, some 2 pixel, 2 pixel, and some black. Okay. This is the style we applied for some elements there. And you are using a data list. Wherever data term is there, font weight we will keep it as bold. That's so that is the basic styles we are giving. Remember, what is React? It is a JavaScript library for building interactive UI. Interactive UI. And if anybody says that, sir, I don't know CSS, Bootstrap, it's like joke. What you are talking? You are building interactive UI without knowing complete UI. What you are talking about? Because many people coming to learn React, they have this point like, I don't know CSS, I don't know Bootstrap. Sorry, you are not suitable as React developer. Right? What is the job of React developer? Building interactive UI. How you can imagine building interactive UI without knowing proper CSS, proper Bootstrap? You are not a React developer. React developer means not learning React and working on React. His main job is building interactive UI. How you can imagine to build an interactive UI without basic of styles, Bootstrap and all these things? No chance. Even interviewer will be like, what he's talking about? He's a React developer and he's not good in UI. What it is? Because React itself is to build interactive UI, right? There is no scope of people for real world development. So without knowledge of proper UI for React, especially in some companies, they ask even SAS, right? In several companies, they ask SAS, and several UX tools also they ask for React developer, because they imagine React developer as genius UI developer. That means a React developer in current software companies is a genius UI developer, a very high professional UI developer. React is not a small technology. It's very heavy, means it's very interactive. And you can't say that I don't know CSS and all. Learning, okay, you can learn. But to become a real world developer on React and to satisfy the work they give in your companies, you have to be perfect in all styles, Bootstrap, everything. Because even when you go to interviews in system tasks, so what, for experienced people also, they give you screen designs. They will say that design them and send us. Based on your design, we will decide whether to take you or not. That's the reason you have to be perfect with all these things to become a perfect React developer, right? And see, now I added CSS, but this CSS is not applying because CSS is not linked to our page. Remember, we never link anything to index.html page. Now your component can import the CSS. Your component can import the CSS. So which component have to use that CSS? You can just use import. Import what? So you can import, it is present in same folder. So dot slash. It is present in some other folder. Dot slash. You know all the path mechanism. Dot slash, what is the file name? Login.css. Now the styles are applied. So you imported this in the component. Now you can see the styles are working. Now we have a login screen with what we designed. But still here we are using some plain effects. Now how to use Bootstrap, I will show you. We will work with that, right? Initially, now we designed a component. And if you have done any CSS, so here very important, every component have to import the CSS individually or globally from index.js. From index.js or globally in index.js. In index.js. Individually, you can import. If you do this import in index.css, the styles will work for all components. That means all the components which are using main form, they will be affected. So if you want only for this component, you can import in this component. That means just you have to use import and so the file name CSS like this we need to define. So for this, I will give an example. Here I will give one example. The example, I will just give the process what I have done. So this I will upload in notes. I will update both groups notes. So today I will update both of them. So we have first what we done, add a new folder in SRC by name components. After that, add a folder for component login. Then add following files into login. What are those files? Login.jsx, another one login.css. So the login.css code I will copy and paste here. I will give those code. This is the login.css code and login.jsx. So login.jsx code, that is the part. And fifth point is go to index.js and keep login in startup. How to keep in startup? You have to just use react.stricta. I will copy that basic here in index.js. That means not using everything. I'm just using this part. So React strict mode, okay. So this is the basic of the entire process what I showed you today. Now you have learned how to design a component and how apply styles to that component. Now we will see how to make the component more interactive by enabling Bootstrap. We will learn Bootstrap and React materials both. Actually, React have their own components library called React material, but it may not have everything that you have in Bootstrap. So people use combination of both. So first we will see with Bootstrap, and now you have to learn the major. In JavaScript, what you learned first, you learned about some techniques like data binding, style binding, class binding, event binding. Same you have to learn here. Data binding means how to store the data, how to collect the data, and how to present. For that, you use a lot of DOM techniques in JavaScript, but in React, it is different. It will be simple, easy for presentations. We will see that now. So we will discuss about two components, how to enable Bootstrap, and we discuss about a major topic called data binding. This is very important. That we'll see in next session, right? Tomorrow we will go there. In tomorrow's session, we will discuss about what is data binding and how do we work with data binding. This is the major thing in React, right? Tomorrow we'll continue, okay? All these notes I will update into two groups, both. Yesterday I just posted yesterday's concept. Today I will upload all the content in both groups, okay na? Right? So tomorrow we will continue.